It all began on a quiet afternoon outside a small-town diner, where an elderly veteran struggled to cross the street with his worn wooden cane. His hands trembled from years of sacrifice, and every step carried the weight of memories only those who have served can truly understand. Suddenly, a reckless teenager approached, laughing loudly with his friends. Without hesitation, he kicked the veteran's cane, sending it clattering across the pavement. The old man crashed to the ground as the teen mocked his pain, unaware that justice was already on its way. As the veteran winced in agony, a low rumble echoed from around the corner. The sound grew louder, the unmistakable growl of motorcycle engines. One by one, riders from a local club pulled up, each patch on their jackets telling stories of loyalty, respect, and brotherhood. They had seen everything. The teenager's confident grin faded into fear as he realized these were men who understood honor and who would not tolerate disrespect toward someone who once defended their freedom. The crowd gathered, murmuring in disbelief. Phones were raised, comments whispered, but the bikers remained silent for a long moment, their stares piercing through the boy's arrogance. It became clear that this wasn't just about a cane, nor a fall, nor a joke gone too far. This was about values slowly fading from society, respect for elders, appreciation for those who served, and empathy for those who carry invisible scars. The tension in the air felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for a lesson to unfold. The teenager's hands shook as he tried to defend himself, but words fumbled from his lips. The bikers approached the fallen veteran gently, lifting him with the kind of care only those who understand true pain can offer. They examined his scraped hands, brushed the dust from his jacket, and helped him stand tall again. The teen watched in silence, realizing how small cruelty makes a person look when compared to genuine honor. It was at that moment he understood just how badly he had failed. Then, as the veteran met the boy's terrified eyes, something unexpected happened. Instead of shouting, the old man spoke softly, his voice carrying the calm weight of wisdom built over decades. He told the teen that strength is not measured by who you push down, but by who you choose to lift up. And while the bikers stood like an iron wall behind the veteran, the teen finally dropped to his knees, begging for forgiveness. Not because he feared punishment, but because he realized he had lost a piece of his humanity. The lesson had begun, and the world watched. The moment the teenager knelt, a chilling silence washed over the street, broken only by the slow exhale of motorcycle engines cooling in the breeze. The bystanders held their breath, mesmerized by the unfolding lesson in humility. One of the bikers, a grizzled man with silver threaded through his beard, stepped forward. His boots echoed against the concrete, each step deliberate, each movement filled with an authority earned through years of trials. He crouched, meeting the boy's frightened gaze, and asked, in a calm tone that carried far more weight than anger ever could, if he understood what he had done. The teen's lips trembled, struggling to form a response, but shame had already stolen his voice. As the crowd looked on, the old veteran winced, shifting his weight carefully on his injured leg. His eyes, faded but wise, watched the boy silently, not with hatred, but with disappointment so deep it felt like a cold wind across the skin. He had seen war. He had seen cruelty. He had watched men sacrifice everything for strangers they'd never meet. And now here he stood, wounded not by bullets, but by a child's lack of respect. The teenager swallowed hard, realizing the pain he caused wasn't only physical. It pierced something far deeper. A younger biker approached next, placing his hand gently on the veteran's shoulder. He was a former service member himself, and the tattoos on his arm told stories of battles fought far from home. He spoke softly, telling the crowd how veterans often carry silent wounds, invisible to most. Trauma, nightmares, memories that cling to the soul like heavy chains. These are the unseen battles fought long after uniforms are hung away. The boy's eyes widened, witnessing humanity he had never considered. The bikers weren't here for revenge. They were guardians of a code forgotten by many. Slowly, the older biker guided the boy to retrieve the cane he had kicked away. It lay near the curb, scratched and splintered from the impact. When the teenager picked it up, the weight of it surprised him. It wasn't just wood. It was history, support, stability for a man whose strength had been tested beyond imagination. For the first time, the teen understood that his careless cruelty could have stolen what little independence the veteran still possessed. His hand shook as he returned it, his head bowed, eyes glistening. The veteran accepted the cane quietly, resting it against his palm. Then he raised his hand, stopping the bikers from speaking further. He looked at the teenager, his voice low but firm, explaining that forgiveness is not owed, it must be earned. However, he also knew that anger only plants more anger, while compassion can change futures. The bystanders leaned in, captivated by the wisdom unfolding before them. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of the lesson, a lesson that would echo through the teen's life for years to come. When the veteran steadied himself, the boy noticed something on his jacket, faded military patches, worn by age and touched by countless memories. Suddenly, the old man seemed larger than life, a living monument to sacrifice. One of the bikers, once a mechanic in the service, explained quietly that each patch represented battles fought, brothers lost, and dignity preserved through unimaginable hardship. The teenager listened, transfixed, as stories of courage painted images more vivid than any movie he had ever seen. The veteran wasn't just an old man struggling to walk. He was a survivor. A woman stepped out from the crowd, her voice quivering as she shared how her grandfather had served as well. She spoke of letters written home, filled with fear disguised as bravery, and how returning soldiers often faced worlds that no longer understood them. The teen felt the weight of her words pressing into his chest. It was as if every pair of eyes watching held a fragment of someone who had given everything. His reckless act now echoed like a disrespect for them all. Shame tightened around him like a heavy chain he couldn't break. Then came the moment that changed everything. The veteran, leaning slightly on his cane, reached into his pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. He showed the teen a young soldier, bright-eyed, uniform crisp, hope burning in his smile. "That was me," the old man whispered. The street fell silent. The teenager stared at the photo, seeing energy and strength in the man who now trembled before him. In that instant, he realized time steals from everyone, turning warriors into elders, and our responsibility is to honor who they once were and who they still are. The bikers surrounded them in a loose circle, not trapping the boy, but shielding the moment so the lesson could settle uninterrupted. The engines ticked softly as they cooled, sounding almost like a heartbeat in the background. A few riders nodded solemnly, their expressions carved by respect and experience. The teenager looked around, seeing not rough men in leather vests, but protectors defined by loyalty, honor, and unwavering principles. Their silence taught more than any shout ever could. Finally, the veteran spoke once more, telling the teen that life is unpredictable, and that one day, he too would grow old, weakened by years he could not escape. He asked gently what kind of world the boy wanted to inherit, one where the young mock the old, or one where compassion is passed from generation to generation. The question echoed through the boy's mind like thunder. He lowered his head in understanding, and as the crowd watched, hearts swelling, they sensed that the teen's transformation had only just begun. The veteran took a slow breath, steadying himself as the weight of the moment lingered in the air. The teenager's eyes remained fixed on the faded photograph, but something deeper stirred inside him. Memories he had buried surfaced, moments when he'd seen his own grandfather struggle to stand, moments he'd shrugged off as inconveniences rather than signs of a lifetime lived. Now, those memories burned with shame, and he wished he could step back in time to practice the empathy he failed to offer. The veteran softly encouraged him to share what he felt, and the boy's voice cracked as he admitted he had never truly seen the elderly as people with stories, pain, and history. The vulnerability in his tone electrified the crowd. One of the bikers, a tall man with calm eyes, stepped forward and spoke about his own transformation when he was younger. He admitted to once being reckless, blinded by youth and ego, until life humbled him in ways he could never forget. He explained that everyone is capable of cruelty when they lack perspective, but wisdom comes from confronting that cruelty within ourselves. The teenager listened intently, realizing he wasn't alone in his mistakes. It wasn't an excuse, but it was a starting point for change. his hands curled into fists, not out of anger, but awakening. The crowd watched, collectively leaning closer, as the biker described how humility had saved him from darker paths. He spoke of mentors who had guided him, who had demanded respect and honor without needing to shout. The veteran nodded approvingly, knowing how powerful the right voice can be at the right moment. The teenager's expression shifted, his arrogance dissolving under the weight of genuine reflection. Tears welled in his eyes, surprising even him, but no one mocked him. Not this time. Instead, the bikers offered a space where honesty was strength. Another biker removed a patch from his own vest, a small symbol of honor earned through service and respect. He held it out, explaining that such symbols aren't trophies, but reminders. Reminders of loyalty, sacrifice, brotherhood. He placed it gently in the teen's hand, telling him that if he truly wished to change, he would start by honoring others before himself. The teen's breath stuttered, overwhelmed by the sudden trust placed upon him. The patch felt heavy, like a promise he wasn't sure he deserved, yet desperately wished to fulfill. The veteran watched all of this quietly, leaning slightly on his cane as if observing a younger version of himself. He told the boy that age does not grant automatic respect, character does. But when someone has given their youth to protect their country, respect should be the least society offers in return. The teenager bowed his head, the first sincere gesture of humility he had shown that day. And in that simple gesture, something subtle shifted. The crowd saw a boy turning into something more, guided not by punishment, but by understanding. A gentle breeze swept through the street, carrying with it the soft murmur of the crowd's whispers. The teenager wiped his eyes, embarrassed by his tears, but the veteran placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. True strength, he said softly, is found when we face the parts of ourselves we fear the most. The words landed like a stone thrown into still water, sending ripples through the teen's heart. He realized he wasn't just apologizing for his actions. He was apologizing for who he had allowed himself to become. Another biker, broad-shouldered and quiet until now, stepped closer and revealed a story of his own father, a veteran who had survived war, but never escaped its shadows. He described how nightmares haunted him long after the battlefield was left behind, and how kindness from strangers sometimes made the difference between despair and hope. The teen's eyes widened, absorbing each detail like a student learning a secret he should have known long ago. Compassion, he realized, could be life-saving. The boy looked again at the cane he had kicked, now resting firmly in the veteran's grasp. He whispered his apology, voice trembling, but the veteran remained silent for a moment. It wasn't because he was angry. He was deciding whether the apology came from fear or growth. When he finally nodded, the boy sagged with relief. He wanted forgiveness, but more than that, he wanted to prove he was worthy of it. That desire, pure and unfiltered, shone through his expression like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The bikers formed a semicircle around the veteran and the boy, no longer imposing, but protective, like guardians of an ancient lesson. One rider knelt beside the boy, instructing him to look around and observe how everyone reacted to the old man's fall. He asked a haunting question: how many helped before the engines roared? The boy blinked, scanning the crowd. Silence. Guilt crept into the onlookers' faces as they realized they had stood frozen while a man suffered. The lesson expanded, not just for one boy, but for everyone present. Slowly, the biker continued, explaining that respect is not just about avoiding cruelty. It is about choosing action when someone needs you. He told the boy that standing by silently can be its own form of harm. The teen swallowed, realization sharp as a blade. Cruelty may start with one person, but indifference allows it to spread. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, seeing themselves reflected in the truth. And deep inside, the teenager vowed, from this day forward, to never be silent when someone needed help. The crowd stood transfixed as the veteran adjusted his cane, leaning more firmly upon it while gathering the courage to say something he had held inside for many years. His voice, though fragile, carried strength born of decades spent protecting a nation that often forgot its protectors. He told the boy that aging wasn't something anyone chooses, but something everyone inevitably faces. He described how the world shrinks when your steps slow and how loneliness creeps in when society stops seeing you. Every word struck the teenager like a revelation, exposing the fragility of time. The boy's breath hitched, realizing he had mocked a future he too might one day inherit. One of the bikers stepped forward, this time a woman with fierce eyes and a gentle spirit. She shared her experience, caring for her father, a veteran who had struggled with post-traumatic stress. She recounted nights spent calming his screams, mornings spent convincing him to face the panic clawing at his chest, and afternoons battling the battles still raging inside his mind. Her voice cracked as she spoke, revealing scars that weren't visible on her skin. The teen felt his heart sink. He had never imagined war followed soldiers home like shadows that never let go. A tear rolled down his cheek, unbidden but honest. The woman pointed to a small metal pin on the veteran's jacket, its edges worn and scratched. She explained its significance: bravery beyond duty, awarded for saving lives during a chaotic firefight decades ago. The teen stared at the metal, realizing he had kicked not just a cane, but a symbol of courage. He whispered a shaky apology once more, louder this time, as if wanting the entire street to hear his remorse. The veteran simply nodded, his approval subtle but meaningful, showing that forgiveness isn't loud. It's quiet and deliberate. A biker with arms like tree trunks crossed his arms and looked at the boy thoughtfully. He emphasized that being young is not a crime, but refusing to learn is. He explained that respect isn't automatically given. It's built through choices, empathy, and understanding. The teen's eyes lifted, no longer clouded by arrogance, but illuminated by realization. He began to understand that strength isn't measured by how hard you can hit, but how gently you can carry someone who's struggling. For the first time, he saw the world beyond his own reflection. The veteran took a small step forward, noticing how the boy flinched not from fear, but from sensitivity to the moment. He placed his wrinkled hand atop the teenager's shoulder, a gesture so simple, yet so powerful it sent shivers down many spines. "You can walk away today," the veteran said quietly, "as the boy who hurt me, or as the young man who learned." The street seemed to hold its breath. The boy inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the choice laid at his feet. A spark ignited in his eyes, humility fused with determination. And just like that, the lesson carved itself into his soul. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation as a younger biker, with patches signifying years spent riding across distant states, spoke gently to the teen about identity. He explained how the world often encourages bravado, pushing young people to chase popularity rather than character. He confessed that, once upon a time, he too sought attention through reckless behavior, but found only emptiness in the applause of the misguided. It was only when he learned to respect others that he discovered respect for himself. The teen listened, absorbing each word like water, soaking into dry earth. The biker pointed to the veteran's trembling hands, explaining they once held weapons to defend people he never met, including future generations. Those same hands now shook not from fear, but from the relentless passage of time. The boy stared, suddenly aware of how cruelly he had mocked the very thing that ensured he could live freely today. Guilt clenched his chest, but this time he didn't look away. Instead, he allowed the pain to teach him, a rare act of courage often overlooked. Another biker approached, holding a small metal dog tag. He placed it in the boy's palm and told him it belonged to a friend who never returned from battle. His voice carried a trembling reverence as he shared how that friend always helped the elderly, believing that protecting the weak was the highest form of honor. The boy closed his fingers around the tag, feeling its cold surface warm against his skin. It was as if a piece of someone else's legacy now rested within him, urging him to rise above who he had been. The crowd leaned closer as the veteran began to share a story of his youth, of the day he watched a fellow soldier fall beside him. His voice cracked, though he tried to hide it. Death in war wasn't cinematic. It was sudden, brutal, and unforgettable. The boy's eyes widened, his breath unsteady, realizing he had laughed at a life shaped by memories too painful for most to imagine. The veteran's trembling voice became a mirror reflecting the weight of mortality, and the boy felt its gravity pull at his soul. Then came a moment few expected. The veteran extended the dog tag toward the teenager, telling him to carry it for 1 week. "Let it remind you of someone who died, so you could grow up safe," he whispered. The boy hesitated, his throat thick with emotion. Accepting it meant accepting responsibility, something he had avoided his entire life. Slowly, his fingers closed around the tag, sealing a silent promise. The bikers nodded approvingly, and the crowd witnessed a transformation so profound it left them speechless. In that quiet street, a reckless boy began evolving into a young man who understood the weight of honor. The boy stared at the dog tag resting in his hand, feeling its edges press into his skin like the outline of a responsibility he had never known. The veteran's voice softened further as he explained how every soldier carries memories heavier than any weapon. Memories of comrades lost, friendships forged under fire, and promises made on blood-soaked ground. The teen swallowed hard, sensing the silent ghosts that lingered behind the veteran's weary eyes. For the first time, he imagined what it meant to come home, not to celebration, but to silence, forgotten by the very people he fought to protect. A tremor traveled through his body, not from fear, but awakening. A biker with a deep, gravelly voice stepped forward next, his jacket adorned with patches of places overseas. He told the boy that soldiers are trained to defend even those who may never show gratitude, a truth that both strengthens and wounds. He explained that every insult, every laugh, every act of disrespect feels like a small betrayal, echoing deeper because veterans never asked for glory. They asked only to live in peace when they returned. The boy felt heat rise in his chest, realizing his actions had chipped at that peace. Regret washed over him like cold water. The biker then turned to the crowd, raising his voice so everyone could hear. He challenged the bystanders, asking where their outrage had been moments earlier when the cane hit the ground. The people bowed their heads, shifting uncomfortably, each person fighting their own battle with guilt. He declared that society's greatest downfall isn't cruelty, it's apathy. A person may act cruelly, but apathy allows cruelty to survive. The teenager's eyes flicked from face to face, understanding that silence is never neutral. Another biker approached, younger than the rest, with eyes that held the fire of someone who had recently learned the same lesson. He shared how a single moment of disrespect in his youth created consequences he couldn't undo, not with apologies, not with time. He explained that the scars we leave on others often become the regrets we carry within ourselves. The teen nodded slowly, absorbing the warning like a prophecy meant only for him. He didn't want to grow into a man haunted by cruelty. Finally, the veteran lifted his cane gently and used it to tilt the boy's chin upward, forcing him to meet his gaze. "Courage," he whispered, "is not found in fists or laughter at someone's pain. It is found in the heart that chooses kindness when no one is watching." The boy's vision blurred with fresh tears, but he didn't wipe them away. They were evidence of feeling, of change, of conscience coming alive. And for the first time, the veteran saw not a careless teenager, but a young man discovering the weight of honor. The sound of the motorcycles cooling faded into the background as the bikers stepped back, giving the boy room to breathe beneath the weight of his lesson. The street felt different now, quieter, heavier, like a sacred space where transformation had taken root. The teenager exhaled shakily, staring at the ground before forcing himself to look up again. He didn't deserve forgiveness, he thought, but he desperately wanted the chance to earn respect. His voice, small but determined, asked how he could repay what he had taken. The veteran's eyes softened, seeing sincerity bloom where arrogance once stood. A biker with weathered hands suggested something unexpected. He proposed that the boy volunteer at the local Veterans Center for a week, helping elders with daily challenges, listening to their stories, and witnessing firsthand the burden they carried. He explained how seeing the world through their eyes would reshape his heart more than any punishment ever could. The teenager nodded vigorously, accepting before hesitation could steal his courage. The crowd murmured in approval, inspired by the idea of redemption earned through service. The veteran added another request, not one of labor, but of presence. He asked the boy to spend time simply sitting with those who often sit alone, to hear their stories, to understand their loneliness, and to learn the names of men who once wore uniforms with pride. He explained that sometimes The greatest healing comes from company, not medicine. The boy's chest tightened. He had never considered how silence can wound just as deeply as physical pain. His solemn nod carried the weight of a promise not easily broken. Next, a biker unfolded a worn leather patch from his vest, giving it to the teen. It was blank, intentionally so. He explained that if the boy completed his week of service with humility and care, they would help stitch onto it a symbol of earned respect, not as a reward, but as acknowledgement of growth. The teenager's breath caught in his throat. A simple patch felt like a mountain he needed to climb, but he welcomed the challenge. He clutched the blank fabric like a seed waiting to sprout. The veteran tapped his cane gently on the pavement, signaling the final part of his demand. He told the boy that when the week ends, he must return, not to prove himself to the bikers, but to show he could face the man he hurt with courage. The teen's heart hammered in his chest, but this time it wasn't fear. It was resolve. He straightened slowly, shoulders no longer slouched, posture no longer mocking. And in that moment, the crowd witnessed a rare transformation. The birth of responsibility in a young soul once lost to arrogance. One of the older bikers, leaning slightly on his own cane, stepped closer and peered deeply into the teen's eyes. His voice held the slow, steady power of someone who had earned every stripe of wisdom lining his face. He explained that respect isn't about flawless behavior, but about how we rise after we've fallen. He described how growth is a lifelong journey, measured in moments just like this, where we confront discomfort and choose humility. The boy felt his heart pound, feeling the truth settle within him like gravity. The veteran gestured toward the crowd. He reminded the teenager that everyone watching had once been young too, and many of them had stumbled along the way. But what defined them wasn't their mistakes. It was the way they chose to change afterward. The teen scanned the faces around him and realized how many held stories of regret, lessons learned through pain, and chances seized for redemption. He didn't feel alone anymore. Instead, he saw a path forward, paved by countless footsteps before him. Then a biker placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, pointing at his group's emblem stitched proudly on leather. He explained that their brotherhood wasn't built on intimidation or fear. It was forged through loyalty, honor, and the defense of those who couldn't defend themselves. He emphasized that true strength always stands on the side of the weak, the weary, and the forgotten. The boy's chest tightened in awe. It was the opposite of everything he once believed strength to be. The veteran watched the boy absorb each lesson, then slowly reached into his pocket. He pulled out another faded photo, this time of a young soldier laughing beside his squad mates. The image radiated joy, captured before tragedy etched lines of sorrow across the veteran's face. He explained softly that many faces in that photo were gone now, taken by war, by time, or by wounds that never healed. The boy stared, seeing the price of freedom written in the smile now held only on paper. His heart clenched. With a steady voice, the veteran told the boy something that froze the street in place. Growing old is a privilege denied to many. The words hit like thunder. The teenager's eyes widened as he realized the weight behind them. He had mocked a man for having survived long enough to grow frail, something many never got the chance to do. His body shuddered, but he didn't turn away. Instead, he whispered the words back softly, promising he would never forget them. The veteran nodded, satisfied. The message had struck deep. The boy stood speechless as the weight of the veteran's final words settled into his bones. Around him, the air shifted. The murmuring crowd softened, no longer fueled by curiosity, but by quiet reflection. The teenager felt as though he had aged years in mere minutes, his thoughts stretching beyond the shallow concerns he once held. He realized that in mocking age, he had mocked survival itself, and that understanding carved humility into his spirit. He lifted his gaze, meeting the veteran's eyes not with fear, but with gratitude for a lesson he never knew he needed. The veteran adjusted his cane and straightened his posture, showing the strength that still pulsed within his aged frame. He explained gently that while forgiveness could be granted, trust must be rebuilt patiently, like a bridge constructed brick by brick. The boy nodded, accepting this truth without resistance. He felt a spark inside, a desire to prove, through actions, not words, that he could be better. The veteran's lips curved into the slightest smile, pride flickering behind his war-worn eyes. It was not victory he saw, but potential. One of the bikers approached with slow, measured steps, placing a biker glove into the boy's hands. Not to wear, he clarified, but to remind. He spoke of how gloves protect the hands that choose to lift others up, not strike them down. He told the boy that every time he saw it, he should remember the day he chose compassion over cruelty. The teen traced the leather seams, feeling symbolism stitched into every thread. A symbol of responsibility, one he would carry long after this street faded into memory. The crowd shifted, leaving room for the boy to stand at the veteran's side. As he walked closer, he noticed how the veteran's breathing steadied with his support, how the simple act of being present eased the weight on frail shoulders. Together, they moved toward a nearby bench. The boy lowered him gently, handling him not like an elder, but like someone sacred. The crowd watched in silence, witnessing transformation not through speeches, but through kindness practiced. This was respect embodied, quiet, intentional, real. As the bikers prepared to leave, engines rumbling back to life, the veteran offered one last piece of wisdom. The world becomes what you choose to contribute to it. Every gesture, every word, every moment of compassion, they all matter. The teen's heart swelled, committing the phrase to memory like scripture. The motorcycles revved, not aggressively, but in salute, their thunder rolling through the street like applause from steel giants. And as they pulled away, the boy remained beside the veteran, no longer out of guilt, but because he wanted to. It was in that lingering moment, as the rumble faded into the horizon, that the lesson completed its journey, not in punishment, but in transformation. As the week passed slowly, the teenager kept his promise. Day after day, he walked through the doors of the Veterans Center, unsure of what he was about to face. But what he found changed him more deeply than he could have anticipated. He listened to stories of bravery and loss, learned the names of men who once walked with pride, and witnessed firsthand the invisible wounds time never healed. Each conversation carved empathy into his heart, replacing the arrogance he once carried like armor. And with every passing day, the empty fabric patch he held began to feel less like cloth and more like responsibility. When his seventh day arrived, he returned to the same street, standing taller than before, not physically, but morally. The bikers were there, engines humming softly, eyes watching with patient expectation. The veteran approached with a steady step, though the cane still bore his weight. He studied the boy's changed expression, recognizing the sincere humility burning in his eyes. Without a word, the veteran nodded to a biker who carefully embroidered a symbol of respect into the patch. The moment the thread locked into place, the boy felt something shift, as if the world had granted him a second chance. The veteran placed his hand over the boy's, reminding him that compassion is not a single act, but a lifelong practice. He spoke softly about how strength is measured not by how loudly you stand above others, but by how quietly you lift those who stumble. The boy's throat tightened, eyes burning once more, not with shame but gratitude. He understood now that time would age him too, and one day, he would need the same compassion he once denied. The veteran smiled, a gesture small but powerful, symbolizing forgiveness earned rather than given freely. As the engines roared to life, the bikers offered a final salute, not through words, but through presence. The crowd, moved by the transformation they had witnessed, began whispering among themselves about the importance of respect, empathy, and legacy. People began to help the veteran into the diner, offering chairs, warm meals, and gentle hands. It was as if the street itself had awakened from indifference. The boy stepped back, understanding that his actions had sparked change not only within himself, but within everyone who watched. For the first time, he felt pride, not for attention, but for growth. And now, long after the final engine fades into the horizon, we are left with a question that lingers in the quiet of our thoughts. Who will we choose to be when no one is watching? Will we mock the frail steps of those who came before us? Or will we honor them for paving the road we stand on? If you believe in compassion, if you carry respect in your heart, And if you value stories that remind us of who we must become, then join this community. Subscribe, leave your thoughts below, and share your voice. Because together, we can build a world where kindness stands tall, even when our strength eventually falls.